Before I get started with some tips today, I just wanted to say there is hope. So I am just past 6 months post-op, and today I am in Spain, and I completed day one, about an 11-mile hike of the Camino Santiago, specifically the Camino Ingles. And yes, I'm sore and I'm tired, but I don't think particularly because I had hip replacement. It's a long hike, and I carried a pretty heavy backpack. I'm guessing it probably had about 18 or 19 pounds in it, maybe even a little bit more. So anyhow, hang in there, work through, do your rehab, get fit again, and live your life. There is hope at the end of the tunnel, and hip replacement is not the end of the road. So good luck, everybody.
This video is part one of two and potentially up to 4 videos, so you might want to subscribe now and set notifications on so you'll be notified when those videos go live. The second video will be about a bone inflammation setback that I suffered shortly after returning from this trip. Well, I'm still thrilled that I got to have this amazing experience, this whole 3-week trip, including the 6 days and 72 miles on the Camino Santiago. There are some things I would have done differently. With perfect 2020 hindsight, I wish I'd heeded the warning of my surgeon. He said, "The key sign you're overdoing it is thigh pain." If you listen closely to my daily updates throughout this video, you'll hear some hints to that. In retrospect, I just wish that I'd recognized it for what it was at the time. As I record this video, I feel like I'm fully recovered from that bone inflammation setback, so the next video will explain what led to that setback and how I recovered from it. I've got a couple other videos in mind that I think you might find interesting and helpful as well. In one of them, I would cover all my preparations for this trip. In the other one, I'd provide a review of all the gear that I packed and took with me on this trip. Some of it's pretty cool, and I think this could be helpful for any long trip that you're planning, but especially if you're planning any hikes. However, these videos aren't really hip specific, so I'll only create them if a lot of you, my viewers, tell me that you'd like to see them. If you do, post in the comments.
This trip is going to be almost 3 weeks long. About a week of that is the Camino Ingles. Before the hike, we're going to spend 4 or 5 days in northern Spain, in Galicia, just touring, the villages and towns up there and sightseeing. And then at the end of the trip, after the hike, we're going to go to Portugal and just check it out. I've never been to Portugal before, so I'm looking forward to that. And it's kind of cool because actually there's a Spanish lady who lives in Lisbon who also was part of our group on the Inca Trail hike last year. So we've reconnected with her, and we'll get together and do a little bit of sightseeing together when we're there in Lisbon. So that should be a lot of fun. And then the icing on top of the cake here, in terms of this trip, is that I was like, I wonder, these are going to be beautiful, scenic European highways and byways. Should I rent a fun car and, go for some nice drives? And so I researched it. It was not very easy for me to get comfortable with the cost because it's pretty costly, but it turns out I'm going to go ahead and do it. My wife was okay with it. I'm going to rent a Ferrari F8 for 2 days. And I'm really looking forward to that. Basically, I don't think I'm ever going to own a Ferrari. So this is my opportunity to drive it and drive it in some beautiful scenery and on some great roads, fun roads, I hope. So I'm really looking forward to that as well. And obviously, I'll be sharing that with you guys. Before I embark on an 18-day trip to Spain and Portugal that includes a 6-day hike on the Camino Santiago, I wanted to take stock of where I am physically. In terms of the hike itself, I have been doing some prep hikes. I did a 4-mile and then a 6-mile trail hike on Saturday. That was yesterday. And I have to say I feel pretty good. Actually, the only thing that was sore from that trail hike were my shoulders. And it's not sort of the touch, it was sort of muscle fatigue from having that pack hanging on those muscles. I hope that that'll be better the next time I go hiking. Typically those things on me acclimate pretty quickly. Other than that, I always have some things going on because I lead a very active lifestyle. So for example, going into this trip, I have a problem with my left shoulder. I think I overextended it or landed on it or both when I was playing volleyball this past week. I have a problem in my lower left back. And that's actually been with me for over 2 months now. I don't know what actually caused it. It seemed to come on as a result of doing some floor work, some abdominal stuff, and then lifting weights and things like that. And it's really been bothersome and has not gotten better. It's a little bit better than it was, but it's still not great. And right now, for example, I have KT tape on it, trying to see if that will help me. I've tried massage, I've tried rest, I've tried all kinds of things, and so far, ice, so far nothing has really solved it completely. So that's going on. And then my right ankle, I sprained a little bit maybe about 3 weeks ago. It's not a severe sprain. I've been able to continue doing everything that I do, but it's been a little bit uncomfortable and sore. So I've been icing that. I've been occasionally wearing braces. I'm taking an ankle compression sleeve with me so that I can use that when I'm hiking if I need to, or if I tweak it and it feels worse, I can put that on and that should take some of the strain off and make it feel better. So those are the things that are going on with me now as I go into this trip, and we'll see how kind it all is to me and how I fare. So wish me luck. We made it to Bilbao in Spain, and everything went pretty smoothly. I think we traveled for almost 24 hours and had some chaos at the beginning, but everything worked out, got here as planned. And someone asked how it was going to be on the long plane flight across the Atlantic, and it was fine. Actually, I had a little bit of pain in my hip joint, but not very much at all. And I didn't even have to get up all that often to stretch. I only did it a couple times, so that was fine. I think the big problem on the flight was that I was actually sitting next to two young babies, and they were crying a good part of the flight. That said, I usually can't sleep on these flights, so it wasn't horrible. The thing that kind of bugged me though is that as we were getting toward the end of the flight, I took a walk, went to the back of the plane, and they had tons of empty seats, including a whole row of extra legroom seats, which is what I paid for. And so I told the attendants, like, why didn't you tell me that there were seats back here when I'm sitting next to two crying babies? And, with typical Spanish service fashion, he's like, well, why didn't you ask? I'm like, how would I know? Anyhow, everything went well. I slept well last night, which is also surprising. I think I slept about 10 or 11 hours. I mean, not nonstop. There were a lot of wakes in the middle of the night, but I was able to go back to sleep. And so I feel a little groggy this morning, but all in all, pretty good considering the jet lag in the flight. So we'll see how I fare during the day. The other big surprise on our flight was that my walking sticks made it all the way here. Checking in through Raleigh, they went right through X-ray, didn't even say anything. In Boston, the lady, as I was putting stuff into the basket, said I would probably have to lose those, or would I like to check my bag? I said no. And surprisingly, they went right through the X-ray, and then even the flight from Barcelona to here, Bilbao, no problem. And on that last flight, which was only an hour domestic flight, my friend Fernando lost his volleyball. They somehow deemed that as too dangerous, and they confiscated his volleyball. So my walking sticks made it, but not his volleyball. Anyhow, go figure. Okay, your intrepid traveler is ready to start on the Camino Santiago today. I am in A Coruña, where we spent the night, and we have to travel now. It's a busy morning. We have to go return the car, fill it with fuel, buy a bus ticket to go to Ferrol, and then do the first day of our hike. So it's pretty early, about 8 a.m., and I hope everything goes smoothly. It was drizzling this morning, but it seems to have stopped now. I've got my pack ready to go. I fell in the shower this morning, which makes me feel really old. Luckily, it was from a seated position, not from standing. But, knock on wood, everything feels okay. So wish me luck on my first day of journey. Our very first stop on the Camino Santiago was this little church, and there was a wedding going on, and a little old lady came running out to us shouting, Peregrino, Peregrino, and we thought we were going to be in trouble and she was going to try and chase us away because of the wedding, but we then learned that Peregrino means pilgrim, and she was coming to help stamp our pilgrim passports. So that was a nice surprise. They do weddings a little bit differently here in Spain. The fireworks, I guess, are to scare away the evil spirits, and it was interesting coincidence because my wife is from Spain, and the bride had the same name as my wife, Nuria. Oh, yeah. Hola, Fernando. How's it going so far?
Ooh, exhausted.
Yes, same here.
But,
So,
but a good one.
so do your impression of the little lady at the church yesterday.
Oh, peregrinos, peregrinos.
That's right. Sweet lady. Okay, well, we're about halfway through day 2 of our Camino Ingles trek. We'll see how the rest goes. Okay, it's the end of day 2 on the Camino Ingles, and I wanted to give you a bit of an update. I did 7 hours of hiking today, 16 or 17 miles, and I am bone tired, but the hip is doing great. I am sore and achy and everything, but I have to say, as far as I can tell, none of it is specific to my hip. Bottoms of my feet are tender just from all the walking, but the weather here in northern Spain has been absolutely perfect. I certainly have sweat my share, but the breezes are cool and the humidity is moderate, so it's been extremely pleasant hiking. I have just been having a great time, and I'm very curious to see how it will be tomorrow after such a long hike today. We've got another 14-mile hike tomorrow to our next stop. And anyhow, we'll just see how it goes. So this morning's hike, just to break things down, we got up and got going about 8:30 and 4 hours of hiking. Then we took about a 2-hour break, had some tapas, which were fabulous, and a couple beers. And then we got on again and did another 3 or so hours of hiking to get to our final destination. And I'm filming this from our Airbnb window. It's just an absolutely fabulous place, and loving everything. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye. Hi, just a couple more notes about our day 2 hike on the Camino Ingles. I did take a couple migraine relief tablets during the course of the day just to sort of head off any potential inflammation or anything. Again, not really thinking it was anything to do with my hip, but I just don't want to take any chances, and I figured that was a moderate precaution and just allowed me to hike more enjoyably. Also, the food here has just been fabulous. We stopped at this place for lunch, and I had 2 beers, and then they gave us a little bowl of potato chips and came by with all kinds of tapas and little bowls of paella with mussels and shrimp and all kinds of good stuff in there with nice pieces of crusty bread. And then when we checked out, the total was like $8. It was, I think, 7.5 euros, $8. Just crazy. And we're finding kind of regularly that in northern Spain, a beer is about 2 euros. So that's just $2.50, something like that. Very reasonable. In fact, sodas are, it seems, more expensive than beer. So there you go. It's the end of day 3, and not coincidentally, I'm on my 3rd beer. So hopefully this is all coherent. Anyhow, we did 14 miles today, and all went well up until about the last 1.5 miles. And I find it interesting when I'm doing sort of extreme stuff like all the hiking from this trip to see what gives out first. And today it seemed to be some fine muscles in my left shin, which is my non-operative side, so again, nothing to do with my hip replacement. But the last 1.5 miles, those were really like tender, inflamed. It hurt to walk. And anyhow, I'm resting them now and hope that they'll feel better tomorrow. I'm a little bit worried. So I'm going to take some anti-inflammatories and just rest the rest of the day, even though it's only about 5 o'clock. We got here about 4 o'clock. But anyhow, this place that we're in is amazing. I wanted to show you this absolutely gorgeous renovated mill Airbnb that we stayed in Galicia in northern Spain. But if you're ever interested in staying in rustic northern Spain, this place is highly recommended. The hostess, Maria, was fabulous. We were doing the Camino Santiago, and she actually picked us up, took us to a grocery store so we could get some provisions, and then brought us here to the house. When Maria and her family got this house, it was abandoned, but they renovated it and got it back to full working condition and actually lived here while they raised their 2 children. In the main living room here, they actually have this old millstone, and it functions. And then they've got this cool glass thing so you can actually see the river passing underneath the house. It's just absolutely fabulous. The kitchen is fully appointed. These beams are rustic and gorgeous. It's amazing. This is one of the 3 bedrooms. They also have 3 full bathrooms. As for me, I'm staying in the secondary bedroom with a nice large bed. And if you have extra guests, there's actually a separate area here with a bunch of additional beds. So if you're looking for a great family vacation, I would highly recommend this Airbnb. Again, Maria was a fabulous hostess. They even left us this artisan bread and some local honey to enjoy. Okay, we're on day 4 of the Camino Santiago. And this has been kind of typical for us on our journey so far. Just not a lot of other pilgrims. They're known as peregrinos here.
Pretty empty roads, but we learned yesterday from our hostess Maria that as we get closer to Santiago de Compostela, it will get very, very crowded as all the different Camino paths converge for the big pilgrimage destination.
Yesterday was day 4, and my shin felt fine all day long. It was a fairly short hike. We did 8 or 9 miles, and that was fine. We got to our destination around noon, which was super early, so we kind of tried to heal from the previous couple days of very long hikes, and because we knew today was going to be a very long hike, 15 miles again. So when I was getting ready for bed, I did feel a twinge in my hip, my operative hip. And I don't think it's anything concerning because it wasn't like outright serious pain. It was definitely a twinge of pain, some minor discomfort. Unfortunately, then I took some of my remaining oxycodone. I had like little half tablets, and I think the result is that sometimes wires me, and I wasn't able to get a good night's sleep. So I'm feeling kind of tired today, and we've got a rough, long hike today. But anyhow, that was day 4. It was worked out pretty well. The weather on yesterday's hike, day 4, was very pleasant. It was overcast most of the morning and not very hot. It got up in the upper 70s. Today it's rainy and cooler, so it's supposed to be just like 71 or 72 degrees. So I'm actually wearing my long-sleeved wool base layer. That should help keep me warm even if I get wet. And I've got a rain poncho that I'll probably be wearing over top of this if it's raining or misting. We're hoping by the afternoon it clears, so hopefully it's only the first few hours of our hike that are going to be uncomfortable. But again, hopefully we have good luck. So far this hike has been fabulous. We've had really good luck with weather and everything. Side note, there are a lot of people named Maria in Spain. Fernando and I joked about it a little bit, but I think the math goes like this. You are having a child, a female child, and your name is not Maria, then my daughter will be named Maria. And if you are named Maria, then I guess you need to pick a different name. But the result has been that, yesterday our hostess was Maria. We stopped to get a coffee and some beverages. The barkeep was Maria. We're meeting a friend in a couple days. Her name is Maria. And there are just a lot of Marias around here. So anyhow, I think it's because it's, at its heart, traditionally a Catholic country. And, Santa Maria, the mother of Jesus. So it's kind of interesting. But I think like 70% of our hosts on the Airbnbs and things are named Maria, and the ones that are not named Maria are usually men. So just kind of a funny little factoid. Today's day 5, and it's our last big hike day. We've got about 15 miles to Sigüero. And if you look outside, it is not looking very promising. In fact, it's probably not possible to see it on the video, but it's raining pretty steadily right now. It's been alternating between steady rain and just mist. And it's supposed to keep doing this until probably noon or so. So we're not quite sure what we're going to do. Our plan was to start a little bit later than usual, around 9 a.m., wear our rain gear, and just make the best of it. But, I don't really want to start out when it's already raining steadily. I'd rather wait for a pause, and we'll see how it goes. Again, part of the bad thing today is that it's this weather, and we have a 15-mile hike, which is at least probably 6 good hours of hiking with some breaks. So we can't wait too long to get started. I will update you at the end of the day, and hopefully things work out. Okay, we're getting started on day 5, 15 miles long hike. The sun was peeking out a second ago. We waited until 11 a.m. this morning because it's been raining all morning. So hopefully the rest of the day is beautiful. Okay.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Buen camino para nosotros.
Buen camino.
So I'm meditating on my Camino Santiago trip so far. This is our last day. Should be a relatively light day. We've got about 10 miles to get to Camino Santiago, and I'm kind of excited to see what it's like, where all the paths converge at the Santiago de Compostela, where they have the remains of St. James. So we'll see how it all goes, and I'll try to capture some of that footage. Yesterday was another long hike, and I can feel definitely like, after 5 consecutive days of hiking, everything is stiff. My muscles are very stiff and joints are a little bit sore. I felt my hip a little bit yesterday as well, and was taking meds to try and, head off any potential inflammation or anything like that. It wasn't serious pain, but I think typically what happens is, after you've been hiking for most of a day, then a lot of the small muscles that are supporting your joints get exhausted. And so I think that's what was happening. Anyhow, so far so good, and hope that the rest of my Camino experience is just as good. Yesterday on day 5, we did about 15 miles, and we didn't start until 11 a.m. because it was raining all morning. But after that, we did well. We got everything done in about 5 hours of hiking and avoided all the rain. There was a little mist, maybe once or twice, but nothing to speak of. We didn't have to worry about putting on rain covers or rain ponchos or anything like that. And it was overcast and then sunny later in the afternoon, so I didn't even have to put on sun lotion. I just wore my floppy sun hat to keep the sun away, and everything worked well. Okay, this is my room in the hotel in Santiago de Compostela. It's sort of a loft room, and I have to be a little bit careful because you can see there, this is now a little too short, but I thought it was just such a cool room. And if you come look in the cabinets here, you can see this other old beam that they had to sort of work around when building these cabinets. Anyhow, I just think this is a really cool room, and they did a really nice job with it. This being our last day on the Camino Santiago, I decided to wear my lucky socks. I call them lucky socks, but they're really not. So what happened was I've been wearing these wool quarter socks because wool is just such a superior material for hiking. And they weren't particularly thick socks, but the toe area of my shoes is a little bit on the narrow side. And so with those just even slightly thick wool socks, my toes were feeling sore and cramped in the front of my shoes. I decided to wear these socks, which I got at a race a few years ago. And they're much thinner. They're good running socks. And I just thought, I won't put the extra bulk of those wool socks in my shoes today and give my toesies a little rest. And it worked out. They're still sore from yesterday, but much less so than if I'd been wearing those slightly thicker wool socks. Now these socks, I call them my lucky socks, but actually they're kind of my favorite socks. I got these at the Indianapolis Half Marathon. I went there just a few years ago with my sister. She was trying to achieve a bunch of goals by the time she turned 50. And so she invited me out to join her for a run. We did not do a half marathon. We did a 5K. But it was a lot of fun. And when we were done, we were just at the tent to check our stats and see how we'd done. And lo and behold, I actually placed like second or third in my age range because I'm such an aged individual. And I won these socks. So I have hardly ever won anything, but I won these socks. And, what more could you want than this gorgeous orange color anyhow? So I was very happy to have these, and I brought them on this trip. So one of the things people are going to be curious about is how did my hip replacement fare during the Camino Santiago? So to recap, the Camino Santiago was 6 days of hiking, 72 miles. That averages about 12 miles per day. That is obviously more hiking than I have been doing, although I had been walking quite a bit. So I'm 6 months post-operative for total hip replacement. I had my hip replaced in January, and about 2 months prior to that, I hiked the Inca Trail in a lot of pain, but I knew that I was having surgery, and as long as I could manage the pain, my doctor said it was okay. So how did my hip fare on the Camino Santiago? I think pretty well. The first few days, I don't think I noticed any aches or pains relative to my hip specifically. The last 3 days, I will say that I did feel some discomfort. So for example, I remember a couple nights ago, I had trouble sleeping because I was feeling a twinge in sort of my hip joint, where it flexes at the pelvis. And it was enough discomfort that it kept me awake for a good part of the night. I did take some painkillers and things like that, but it was pretty uncomfortable. And then the last 2 days, it has been somewhat uncomfortable. Also my thigh, my quad muscle, which still kind of feels funny after the surgery, was in some pain and discomfort. I'm not really limping. It isn't that bad, but there is some discomfort. Today starts phase 3 of our vacation. Fernando kind of designated it as a 3-phase vacation. The first phase was northern Spain. We went to Bilbao, we went to Santander, we stopped in Llanes, we went up into southern France to Biarritz, and then we went in second phase. We did the Camino Santiago, specifically the Camino Ingles, and we just finished that yesterday. So we're here in Santiago de Compostela. And then the third phase, we're taking a bus later today to Portugal, to Porto. And we're going to spend a few days in Porto and then a few days in Lisbon. So that will culminate our almost 3-week vacation.
Wrap up. If you found today's video helpful, or in fact if you found any of my videos helpful, please pay it forward by letting others know about my videos. There are hundreds of thousands of individuals having total hip replacement every year, and I can't reach them all. So I'd really appreciate your help when you're on a Facebook support group or talking with friends or family. Just point them to any of my videos that you found helpful. I'd really appreciate it, and it helps me further my goal, which is to help as many people as I possibly can. At the beginning of the video, I reviewed my physical condition, including some non-hip related injuries that I'm suffering from. And so I'd like to kind of update you on those after the trip. In terms of the right ankle sprain that I had going into this trip, I ended up wearing that compression sleeve for most of the hike. And honestly, it didn't feel any worse after hiking the Camino Santiago than it did beforehand. And now I'm about 6 weeks after that trip, and that sprained ankle is a distant memory. My ankle's totally fine now. I mentioned a volleyball injury in my left shoulder, and honestly, I think it was a little bit uncomfortable for part of my trip, but again, it just sort of faded into the background. As with many of these things, you take care of it and it eventually gets better. So no problems there. The third thing I mentioned was some lower left back pain, and I still have that. So now it's been probably coming on 3 or 4 months that I've been suffering with that. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do there. I think I might need to go in to see a specialist and see if they can help me diagnose what's going on there. But again, it's not stopping me from doing too much. I am sort of watching the level of my abdominal and weight workouts just to make sure I don't aggravate it further, but I'm still able to play volleyball, hike, and all the other things that I enjoy. Now that this trip is behind me, and with perfect 20/20 hindsight, we've all got that, don't we? What would I do differently? In terms of the gear that I packed, I wouldn't change anything. There were some things that I didn't use, but they were still good as precautions, and if the weather had turned out differently or some other factor had turned out differently, I might have needed those items. So I kind of thought through it, and everything I took with me, I'm glad I took with me. In terms of preparing for the trip, I think I could have done a better job. So if you recall, I basically did a 4-mile walk with my backpack fully loaded, and then I did a 6-mile trail hike with my backpack fully loaded. That's it. And I really think that the difference between being able to hike a certain distance and then hiking 6 days long distances consecutively is pretty significant. So if I were to do this again, I think I would probably try and hike 3 times during 1 week with my pack, maybe 4 miles, 5 miles. And then the next week I would probably hike 6, 7, 8 miles 3 times that week. And I think at that point I would have better acclimated myself and prepared myself for the Camino Santiago. In terms of the walk itself, the Camino Ingles is the specific walk that we did, and that can be done in 5 to 8 days. We did it in 6 days, and in retrospect, and after having recovered now from that bone inflammation setback that I've mentioned, I would have tried to space it out even further. And more than that, there were some things I could have done differently. There were options to get porter services to take your backpacks from one stop to the next. I think I should have done that. It wasn't very expensive, sounded pretty convenient, and that would have saved me carrying 19 or 20 pounds on my back during all those hikes. So that would have just taken a lot of load off of my body and off of my hip. After walking the Camino Ingles, we still had another week in our vacation, and we did a lot during that week. We walked a lot, we played volleyball the day before we came back to the States, a lot of volleyball, more than I normally play. And I think that if I were doing this trip again, I would make sure to take more time to rest after the Camino Ingles, because that was pretty intense. And so I think a good 3 days of rest after that would have been really good for my body, and I think would have helped me prevent any setbacks. What about the Camino Ingles itself, or the Camino Santiago network? It was not exactly what I expected. I thought this was going to be a hike. It's really more of a walk, and of course it's known as a pilgrimage. So if you're looking for a hike,
this is really not a hike. It's more of a walk. You're in not heavily populated, but you're definitely going through populated areas. You're often walking on back roads that are not full of traffic, but you're not far away from civilization. It's not like some of the other hikes I've done, which are more like adventure hikes, like the Milford Track in New Zealand, or the Inca Trail in Peru, or even the hike I did many years ago in Malaysia in the Taman Negara, their national forest. So I would say that the Camino Santiago and the Camino Ingles are very achievable goals. You really have a lot of support resources. I mean, honestly, if we didn't want to hike one day, or if I felt bad about it, we could have gotten an Uber or a taxi and just taken ourselves to the next stop. It is that easy. So I really think that for anyone looking for an achievable goal, it's pretty awesome, and I'd highly recommend it. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there were not a lot of photo opportunities along the Camino Ingles. It is not a very touristy area. It is not a super scenic area. You're going through small villages and agricultural areas, and the northwestern part of Spain is not heavily developed for tourism. We talked to our hostess Maria one time. I'm not going to tell you which Maria, you'll have to guess. And she was telling us about that and the fact that it's just far enough away from the tourist hubs of Madrid and Barcelona, etc., that it hasn't really caught on as a tourist destination. Now, the good part of that is it wasn't crowded, and food and accommodation was very reasonably priced. So if you want to take sort of a low-key vacation, enjoy some beautiful countryside and more of a local flavor, and literally when it comes to flavor, some delicious local food and beer, I would highly recommend this area. I thought it was awesome. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this is really intended to be part one of a two-part video series, and the second part is going to be talking about my bone inflammation setback. And I think that this trip did contribute to that. So I want to talk to you all about how that happened, what caused it, and how I recovered from it. So if you're not already a subscriber, I hope you'll take a second now to subscribe and turn notifications on so that you'll be notified when that video goes live. If you want to know more about how I prepared for this trip, or my packing checklist, or our trip itinerary, or about some of the cool gear that I selected and purchased for this trip, then let me know in the comments. If I hear from enough of you, I'll put something together. Thanks for watching, and I'd like to wish you a buen camino. Adios.